Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Optimal Experience. I'm Ryan, and today we are taking a trip to Pandora. We are throwing the Ryzen 9 3950X and the RX 9070 XT at one of the most beautiful games even at low settings, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora. And naturally, we're doing all of this on CachyOS to see if Linux can handle the heat. Now a quick heads up before we dive in, I recorded this footage using OBS. Because YouTube loves to crush video quality and cap frame rates, what you see on your screen might look a little softer than what I'm seeing on my high refresh rate monitor. You might catch some compression artifacts here and there, but trust the frame counter. That tells the real story. So here's the plan. We're running the gauntlet. Low, medium, high and ultra. We're testing 1080p, 1440p and the big one 4K. And to make it all possible, we've got FSR 4 ultra quality and frame gen turned on. Enough talking, let's slice this cake. Alright, kicking things off at the bottom of the ladder. This is 1080p using the low preset, basically the competitive shooter configuration. And look at the counter fly. We are averaging a massive 233 FPS. 233. At one point, we actually peaked at 516 FPS. That is ridiculous for a game that looks good even on low settings. And the 1% lows, they never even dip below 76. So if you are rocking a 240Hz monitor, this is absolutely buttery smooth. Alright, pumping up the visuals to the medium preset. Usually this is where you expect to see a hit to performance, right? Well, barely. We are still averaging 223 FPS. That is a drop of just 10 frames. You can literally not even feel that difference. But look at the 1% lows. Our minimums actually climbed to 89 FPS. So the game looks better. The lighting has more depth and it's running even more stable than on low. If you are playing at 1080p, skip low. Medium is clearly where the party starts. Okay, cranking it up to high. Usually this is where you'd expect to see a card start sweating a little bit, right? Especially with all this foliage rendering. Nope, we are still in the 200 club. We are holding the line at an average 201 FPS. Now did we take a hit here? We lost about 20 frames off the average and our minimums dipped back down to 72 FPS. But let's be real for a second. We are running Avatar on high settings at over 200 frames per second. That is absurd. The game looks lush, the motion is flawless. If you have a high refresh 1080p monitor, this is honestly a great experience. And finally, the big one, Ultra. Every slider cranked to the right, maximum eye candy. Usually this is where a game like Avatar brings a PC to its knees. But check this out, we are averaging 173 FPS. 173. We are looking at peaks over 300 and even in the heaviest scenes we never drop below 67 FPS. So if you're on a 1080p screen, just turn it all up. You are getting the full visual feast, the lighting, the shadows, the textures, and you are getting a competitive shooter frame rate. There is literally no reason not to run this. Alright, step aside 1080p. This is where the RX 9070 XT really wants to live. 1440p. Starting with the low preset again. Check out that average, 181 FPS. We lost some off the top end compared to 1080p, sure, but look closer. Our minimum frame rate just jumped to a rock solid 100 FPS. That is higher than our 1080p minimums. This tells me that the GPU is finally stretching its legs and taking the bottleneck off the CPU. The result? Zero stutters, just pure high resolution fluidity. If you have a 165Hz 1440p monitor, you are saturating it comfortably. Bumping it up to medium at 1440p, now check this out. We've averaged 172 FPS. That is almost identical to our 1080p Ultra result. So here's the question, would you rather have 1080p with everything maxed out or 1440p with medium settings? Because they perform exactly the same. Personally, I'm taking the extra pixels every time. Now we did take a hit on stability here. Our minimums dropped from that rock solid 100 down to 71 FPS. so you might feel a tiny stutter in the heaviest scenes compared to low, but honestly for the visual upgrade you're getting, it's absolutely worth the trade. Alright, cranking it up to high. Now for a lot of you with 1440p monitors, the magic number is 144 FPS. Can we hold it? Easy. We are averaging 154 FPS. So even with the better lighting, the denser foliage and the longer draw distances, we are still maxing out 144 Hz panel. But keep an eye on the minimum. We dipped down to 62 FPS in the 1% lows. We are flirting with that 60 FPS line now. It's still smooth, don't get me wrong, but if you are super sensitive to stutter, you might feel a tiny hitch here or there in the really busy scenes. And finally, for 1440p, the Ultra preset. This is the configuration most of you probably want to run. Maximum pixels, maximum details. And the average, 125 FPS. That is excellent. We are literally doubling the standard 60 FPS target. The game looks absolutely stunning, and for 99% of your playtime it feels incredibly fluid. However, we finally found a crack in the armor. Look at that minimum, 50 FPS. We finally dipped below the magic 60 FPS line in the 1% lows. Does it ruin the experience? No. If you have a FreeSync or G-Sync capable monitor, you probably won't even notice it. But if you are sensitive to frame pacing, maybe drop the shadows to high just to keep that minimum up. Otherwise, enjoy the eye candy. Alright, welcome to the big leagues, 4K. We are pushing 4 times the pixels of 1080p now. Starting with the low preset, and would you look at that, we are still breaking the 100 FPS barrier, averaging 111 FPS, triple digits at 4K. That is wild. Because of the sheer resolution, even on low settings, the game looks remarkably sharp. The edges are crisp, the text is clear, but you do lose some of that atmospheric depth in the lighting. And watch out for those minimums. We had 51 FPS in the 1% lows, so the pixel count is definitely heavy even for FSR 4 to handle, but if you want that razor sharp image, it is undeniably playable. Okay, wait a second, we just switched to medium settings at 4K. Usually this is where 4K performance falls off a cliff, but look at that average, 106 FPS. We lost what, 5 frames compared to low? This is literally a margin of error. You are getting better shadows, better reflections and better textures for free. So here's the rule, if you are playing at 4K, do not play on low. It is a waste of a good monitor. Just turn it up to medium, the card clearly doesn't mind the extra work. Now the minimums are still hanging around 49 FPS, so again, make sure FreeSync is on, but honestly, for a 4K experience, this is incredibly smooth. Moving up to high settings at 4K, now this is usually where GPUs go to die. We're rendering one of the most demanding open worlds ever made at a massive resolution, and yet, we are averaging 94 FPS. 94. That is nearly triple digits in a scenario that usually brings PCs to their knees. Visually, it's breathtaking. But, gravity is starting to kick in. Check the minimums, 45 FPS. We're definitely feeling the weight of those high-res textures now in the really intense battles. So if you don't have a FreeSync or G-Sync monitor, you might feel a stutter, but if you do, turn it on, because averaging 90 FPS at 4K is absolutely worth a few dips. And here we are, the absolute ceiling. 4K resolution, ultra settings. This is the hardest thing you should throw at a GPU in 2026. And the result? We made it. We averaged 66 FPS. We officially crossed the golden 60 FPS line. For a game this demanding, that is a massive achievement. But you can feel the weight now. We topped out at 78 FPS and our minimums hit 50. So the card is giving us everything it has. It's not that high refresh rate feeling anymore. It's a heavy cinematic console killer experience. Is it playable? Yes. Is it stunning? Absolutely. But is it optimal? Honestly, I'd drop back to medium, get that 100 FPS smoothness back. But knowing you can run ultra if you want to, that's a nice flex. Okay, enough with the practical advice, let's get stupid. 8K resolution, that is 33 million pixels. Even on low settings, can the RX 9070 XT even boot the game? Well, barely. 13 FPS. 13! We aren't even playing a video game anymore, we are watching a PowerPoint presentation. Our maximum frame rate was 16, our minimum was 10, and I think I actually saw the GPU physically sweating. So unless you enjoy playing Avatar as a turn-based strategy game, do not try this at home. We finally found the limit. Okay, so 13 FPS wasn't painful enough. Let's see if we can actually melt the silicon. 8K resolution, ultra settings. This is purely for science and maybe a little bit of sadism. Oh my god, look at it. We are averaging 8 FPS. Single digits. I'm pretty sure I could draw the frames faster than the GPU is rendering them. We peaked at 10, we dipped to 6. At 6 frames per second, you aren't playing Avatar, you are watching a very expensive slideshow of blue people. So there you have it. The RX 9070 XT is a beast, but 8K Ultra, that is a bridge too far. Let's never speak of this again. Okay, let's wash the taste of 8 FPS out of our mouths. We are swinging the pendulum all the way back. 720p resolution. But we're keeping it on ultra settings just to see what happens. And we are flying again. 219 FPS on average. We're basically turning Avatar into Counter-Strike at this point. At one moment we peaked at 384 FPS. 384. But here's the interesting part. Notice how our average isn't that much higher than 1080p. That is because the RX 9070 XT is barely even trying. We are fully CPU bound now. The Ryzen 3950X is running as fast as it physically can. So if you want the game to look like a really high budget watercolor painting and run at esports speeds, 720p Ultra is your home. And finally, the absolute bottom of the barrel. We're staying at 720p Ultra, but I took the FSR 4 and I cranked it all the way down to Ultra Performance mode. So internally the game is rendering at what, 240p? It looks like abstract art. It's blurry, it's shimmering, it honestly looks like a PS2 game trying to run ray tracing. But look at that max FPS, 508 FPS. We officially broke the 500 FPS barrier in Avatar. That is Counter-Strike territory. But notice the average, 237 FPS, that is barely higher than our last test. Why? Because the poor Ryzen 9 3950X is screaming for mercy. The GPU is basically asleep and the CPU physically cannot prepare frames any faster. So yes, you can run the game at 500 FPS, but you won't be able to see what you're shooting at. Please don't do this. So what did we learn today? We learned that at 1080p, the RX 9070 XT turns Avatar into a competitive shooter. We learned that at 8K it turns Avatar into a PowerPoint presentation, and we learned that my CPU really hates 720p. But if you're looking for that optimal experience, it is undoubtedly 1440p. Whether you run high or ultra, you're getting that perfect balance of higher refresh fluidity and incredible visuals. That is where this card lives. And honestly, 4K was the surprise of the day. If you are willing to drop to medium settings, which barely looks different from ultra, you can easily get a smooth native 4K experience over 100 FPS. That is impressive. And remember, we did all of this on CachyOS. No Windows bloat, no driver nightmares, just pure raw performance on Linux. If you enjoyed watching me torture my GPU for science, please leave a like, it really helps the channel grow. And let me know in the comments what game should we benchmark next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.